6 months after the divorce, my ex-husband called without warning, not to apologize, not to ask about our child. He invited me to his wedding. I was still in a hospital bed. My daughter had been born less than an hour earlier. I told him I wasn't coming. I told him I had just given birth. I hung up. 30 minutes later, the door to my room flew open. He walked in panicked, breathing fast, his eyes skipping past me to the bassinet. He didn't say congratulations. He didn't ask how I was. He asked the nurse what time the baby was born. He asked if the records could be changed. He asked if anyone else had been present. The nurse looked at me. I said nothing. He stood there for less than 3 minutes. Then his phone rang. He stepped into the hallway. When he came back, his face had changed. He left without another word. 2 days later, I was served papers demanding a DNA test. A week later, a report arrived saying he wasn't the father. Everyone believed the paper. I didn't. And that was the moment I stopped explaining myself and started documenting everything. This is not a story about revenge. It's a story about silence, timing, and what happens when a woman refuses to disappear quietly. The nurse finished checking my vitals at 3:04 a.m. She wrote the time on the chart clipped to the foot of the bed and asked if I wanted water. I said yes. She handed me a small plastic cup and reminded me not to stand yet. My daughter slept in the bassinet beside me, wrapped tight, her name printed on a card taped to the rail. At 3:17 a.m., my phone buzzed. A message from my ex-husband. We need to talk. I didn't reply. By 6:40 a.m., the room had filled with routine. A different nurse checked the bracelet on my wrist. Another scanned the barcode on my daughter's ankle. A cleaner emptied the trash. No one mentioned the man who had come and gone in the night. At 8:12 a.m., my mother arrived with a tote bag and a folded sweater. She asked if I had slept. I said a little. She asked if he had been there. I said yes. She didn't ask more. The papers arrived 2 days later. A courier knocked at 10:06 a.m. and asked me to sign on a digital screen. The envelope was thin. Inside was a court notice requesting a DNA test. The language was neutral. The deadline was not. I opened a folder on my laptop and named it with the date. I scanned the notice and saved it. I added the hospital discharge summary. I added photos of the bassinet card and the ankle bracelet. I didn't label anything with explanations. At 2:30 p.m., my ex-husband emailed. He wrote that his fiancée had concerns. He wrote that there were questions about timing. He wrote that cooperating would clear everything. I replied with one sentence, "Please communicate through the court." I saved the email. The test was scheduled for the following Monday at 9 a.m. at a private lab. I arrived early with my daughter and my mother. The receptionist checked IDs and asked us to sit. My ex-husband arrived at 9:12 a.m. He did not look at the baby. He spoke to the receptionist. He sat across the room. The technician called my name at 9:21 a.m. She wore gloves and explained the process. Swabs, sealed envelopes, chain of custody. I watched her write times and initial boxes. I asked for copies of everything. She said I would receive them by email. I wrote her name down. At 10:05 a.m., we left. In the parking lot, my ex-husband said we should talk. I said I had to feed the baby. He said he was under pressure. I said nothing. The result arrived on a Friday at 4:18 p.m. The subject line read, "Results available." The document stated that he was not the biological father. The margin notes were empty. The lab logo looked official. My phone started ringing. His fiancée called first. She said she was relieved. She said the truth always comes out. She said she had photos. I asked her to email them. She said later. I wrote the time down. My ex-husband called next. He said he was shocked. He said he needed space. He said this changed everything. I said I would speak to the court. I hung up. I didn't cry then. I printed the report. I placed it in the folder. I noticed the report listed a collection time that didn't match the timestamp on the chain of custody receipt. I circled it with a pen. That evening, his mother texted my mother. She wrote that this was unfortunate and that children suffer when adults lie. My mother didn't reply. I took a screenshot and saved it. On Monday morning, I called the lab. I asked about the discrepancy. The representative put me on hold. She returned and said she would check with quality control. She asked me to email the receipt. I did. At 11:43 a.m., the lab emailed back. They said they would review the sample handling. They asked if I consented to a retest under supervision. I said yes. I copied the court clerk on the reply. By Tuesday, my ex-husband filed a motion to suspend child support pending clarification. The language cited the first report. The hearing date was set for 2 weeks out. I added the motion to the folder. I did not confront anyone. I fed my daughter. I slept when she slept. I answered emails. I kept dates straight. On Thursday at 9 a.m., a government-supervised lab appointment was confirmed. The location was different. The process was longer. An official verified IDs and sealed samples in front of us. He explained penalties for interference. I listened. I asked for copies. When we left, my ex-husband said he hoped this would end things. I said it would clarify them. That night, I updated the folder index. I didn't know what would happen next. I only knew the first paper had moved too fast, and the second process moved carefully. That difference mattered. The retest was scheduled for Thursday at 9 a.m., but the pressure began before sunrise. At 6:18 a.m., my ex-husband emailed asking if we could handle this privately. At 6:24, his fiancée sent a message requesting that I stop harassing the lab. At 6:31, his mother forwarded a news article about paternity fraud. I saved each message without replying. At 7:10 a.m., I packed the diaper bag with exact items. 2 diapers, wipes, a bottle, the hospital blanket. I placed the folder in the front pocket. I left the apartment at 7:42 and took the bus instead of a taxi. I wanted a receipt with a timestamp. The driver tore the ticket at 7:55. I kept it. At the government lab, a security guard checked IDs. At 8:38 a.m., he logged names by hand. A supervisor explained the process again. 2 swabs, 2 witnesses, sealed envelopes, photographs of seals. I asked for the photos. They were emailed at 9:12 a.m. I forwarded them to the court clerk. My ex-husband arrived at 9:19 a.m. He stood beside his fiancée, not beside me. When the supervisor asked who would accompany the child, he hesitated. I stepped forward. The supervisor nodded and wrote my name. Inside the room, the supervisor read the penalties out loud. My ex-husband interrupted to say he understood. The supervisor asked him not to interrupt again. The swabs were taken at 9:31 a.m. The seals were photographed at 9:36. We left at 9:44. In the parking lot, his fiancée said this would finally end the drama. She said she had been patient. She said she didn't want complications before the wedding. I asked her to send the photos she claimed to have. She said the lab would make them unnecessary. She turned away. By noon, the tone changed. My ex-husband's lawyer emailed requesting a delay of the hearing. The reason cited new evidence pending. I forwarded the request to the clerk and noted the time. The clerk replied that deadlines remained. At 2:05 p.m., my ex-husband's mother called my mother. She asked if I would be reasonable. My mother said all communication should go through counsel. The call ended in under a minute. I wrote the duration down. The first forced choice happened that evening. My ex-husband emailed a group thread including me, his fiancée, and his mother. He wrote that he was caught in the middle and asked me to withdraw cooperation for the sake of peace. He asked his mother to explain. She replied that families solve problems quietly. His fiancée replied with a heart emoji. I replied with one sentence. I will follow court instructions. I removed myself from the thread. The next day, the lab acknowledged receipt of the samples and estimated results in 7 to 10 business days. The email included a case number. I saved it and forwarded it to the court. My ex-husband emailed asking why I involved the court. I replied, because this is already in court. I saved his reply, which said, you didn't have to make it like this. On Monday, the first lab emailed again. They said their quality review found no irregularities. They attached an amended report correcting the collection time, but not the conclusion. I compared timestamps. The amended report was issued after the retest, not before. I circled the date and wrote post hoc. On Tuesday, my ex-husband's fiancée posted a photo online of wedding invitations. The caption said, fresh start. I took a screenshot. I noted the date. I did not comment. On Wednesday, the court clerk emailed to confirm the hearing remained scheduled. She attached instructions for submitting evidence. I compiled a list: hospital records, chain of custody, screenshots, emails, receipts, and lab correspondence. I numbered each item. I submitted them at 4:22 p.m. The confirmation arrived at 4:24. The government lab results arrived the following Friday at 3:08 p.m. The email subject read, results. I opened it slowly. The report stated that my ex-husband was the biological father. The probability was listed. The signatures were clear. The seals matched the photos. My phone rang at 3:11 p.m. I did not answer. At 3:14, my ex-husband emailed, call me. At 3:17, his fiancée emailed asking how the lab made such a mistake. At 3:20, his mother emailed asking for a meeting. I forwarded the report to the court and closed my laptop. That night, I fed my daughter at 8:40 p.m. I washed bottles at 9:05. I put the folder back on the shelf at 9:30. I did not celebrate. I prepared for the hearing because truth had arrived, but consequences move on schedules. The hearing was set for Tuesday at 10 a.m., but the boundary was crossed before the courtroom opened. At 7:28 a.m., my ex-husband's lawyer emailed asking for a private discussion to avoid embarrassment. The message was marked urgent. I forwarded it to the court clerk and did not reply. At 8:02 a.m., my ex-husband called from a withheld number. I let it ring. At 8:06, his fiancée sent a message asking if we could reset and move forward like adults. I saved it. At 8:11, his mother sent an email stating she had spoken to people and that the hearing could be postponed if I was cooperative. I saved that too. I arrived at the courthouse at 9:32 a.m. with my mother and my daughter. Security checked the stroller and logged the time. The clerk stamped my documents at 9:41. I took a seat on the wooden bench and waited. My ex-husband arrived at 9:55 with his lawyer and fiancée. They sat together. He did not look at the stroller. His lawyer approached me at 9:58 and said we should talk before the judge came in. I said I would speak in court. Inside the courtroom, the judge asked for the government lab report first. The clerk handed it over. The judge read silently. My ex-husband's lawyer objected to procedure. The judge asked for specifics. The lawyer referenced the first lab report. The judge asked for the chain of custody. The clerk provided it. At 10:17 a.m., the judge asked why a private lab was used first. My ex-husband's lawyer said it was efficient. The judge asked why the collection time had been amended after the retest. The lawyer said it was a clerical issue. The judge asked for documentation. None was provided. At 10:26 a.m., the judge asked my ex-husband directly if he had requested the private test. He said yes. The judge asked if anyone else influenced the process. He hesitated and said his fiancée had concerns. The judge asked if family members contacted the lab. His lawyer objected. The judge overruled and asked again. My ex-husband said his mother might have followed up. At 10:34 a.m., the judge read aloud an email timestamped before the first results sent by my ex-husband's mother to the private lab, requesting expedited processing and discretion. The judge asked if this email was authentic. The lab representative, present by video, confirmed it was. At 10:41 a.m., the judge asked the lab representative to explain discrepancies. The representative said the first sample had been handled by a subcontractor. The judge asked why this was not disclosed. The representative said it should have been. At 10:48 a.m., the judge ruled the first report unreliable. The government-supervised report was accepted as controlling. The judge reinstated child support effective immediately and ordered back payments from the date of birth. The clerk noted the amounts. The second step of the loop closed when my ex-husband's fiancée spoke without being asked. She said she only wanted clarity before marriage. She said she had evidence that was never submitted. The judge asked what evidence. She said photos. The judge asked why they were not filed. She said she didn't think she had to. The judge instructed her to sit. At 11:02 a.m., the judge addressed my ex-husband. He asked if he wished to apologize to the court for misuse of process. My ex-husband said he was misled. The judge asked by whom. He said his fiancée had shown him things. The judge asked for names and dates. He could not provide them. At 11:09 a.m., the judge warned all parties against further interference and set a compliance deadline for payments and documentation. The hearing ended at 11:12. Outside the courtroom, my ex-husband followed me into the hallway. He said he hadn't known how far it would go. He said his fiancée had pushed. I said nothing. His mother arrived and said we should speak privately. I said no. At 11:26 a.m., my ex-husband's lawyer emailed requesting payment details. I replied with the clerk's instructions. At 11:31, the clerk emailed confirmation of the order. I saved it. By afternoon, the wedding announcement disappeared from social media. By evening, my ex-husband emailed an apology. It was 3 sentences long and asked to meet. I did not answer. The boundary had been crossed, documented, and addressed by the system. I did not raise my voice. I did not accuse. I let their words, emails, and actions line up against dates and procedures. The loop continued to close on its own. The order went into effect at 12:01 a.m. on Wednesday. The clerk's email listed the exact timestamp. It also listed the payment portal, the case number, and the warning language for noncompliance. I printed it and added it to the folder. I did not notify anyone. The system did that on its own. At 8:09 a.m., my ex-husband's bank sent an automated notice confirming the setup of child support deductions. The message was brief and impersonal. It included a start date and an amount. I saved it. At 8:14, his lawyer emailed to confirm receipt. He asked for confirmation of my address. I replied with the address and nothing else. At 9:20 a.m., my ex-husband emailed asking if we could put the court behind us. He said he wanted to be present. He said he was ready to do better. He asked if we could talk after work. I did not reply. At 9:38, his fiancée emailed me directly for the first time. She wrote that she had misread the situation and hoped there were no hard feelings. I saved it. At 10:05 a.m., the private lab sent a follow-up message acknowledging the court's decision and stating that the initial report should not be used for legal purposes. They attached a revised disclaimer. I saved it and forwarded it to the clerk. At 11:12 a.m., my ex-husband's mother emailed the court clerk requesting a copy of the order. The clerk replied that parties could access documents through counsel. The mother replied again, asking for clarification. The clerk did not respond. I saved the exchange. At noon, I went to the post office and opened a P.O. box. The clerk checked my ID and printed a receipt with the box number and time. I put the key on a ring and attached it to my bag. I updated my address with the court using the provided form. I left the field for phone number blank. At 1:30 p.m., my ex-husband's workplace HR emailed him and copied me, asking to verify dependent information for benefits. The email referenced the court order. He replied asking to remove me from the thread. HR apologized and corrected it. I saved the first message. At 2:18 p.m., my ex-husband called again from a withheld number. I let it ring. At 2:22, his lawyer emailed asking if I would consider mediation to smooth the transition. I replied that communication should remain in writing. I copied the clerk. At 3:07 p.m., the compliance office emailed to confirm receipt of the lab disclaimer and closed the inquiry. The message stated no further action was required unless new information arose. I archived it. At 4 p.m., a calendar invite appeared in my inbox for a meeting titled Family Discussion. The organizer was my ex-husband's mother. The location was listed as her apartment. I declined without comment. At 4:06, she emailed asking why. I did not reply. The third step completed itself at 4:19 p.m. when my ex-husband emailed the clerk directly asking to delay enforcement because he was misled by conflicting reports. He attached the private lab's initial result. The clerk replied that the court had ruled and referenced the government report. The clerk copied his lawyer. The clerk did not copy me. I saved the forwarded copy when his lawyer sent it to all parties by mistake. At 5:02 p.m., my ex-husband's fiancée sent a message asking if I would agree to remove my name from public filings to avoid embarrassment. She said it would help everyone move on. I replied with one sentence, "Please direct requests to the court." I blocked her number. That evening, a missed payment notice arrived from the payment portal. The notice listed the grace period and penalties. It was automated. It did not accuse anyone. It did not ask for explanations. It listed dates. I saved it. On Thursday morning at 7:45 a.m., the payment cleared. The portal sent a confirmation. I did not acknowledge it. At 8:30, my ex-husband emailed asking if I had received it. I did not reply. At 10:10 a.m., the clerk sent a notice confirming compliance and scheduled a brief follow-up review for documentation only. No appearances required. The date was set. I added it to my calendar. By noon, the narrative shifted without a conversation. The private lab distanced itself. The workplace corrected records. The court enforced orders. Family members were redirected to policy. The attempts to manage outcomes through side channels stopped working. I did not meet anyone. I did not explain my choices. I answered only where required and only in writing. The evidence no longer needed my voice. It had its own path through timestamps, signatures, and automated replies. By the end of the day, there were no more emails asking me to reconsider. There were only confirmations and receipts. The system had responded, not with emotion, but with procedure. The collapse didn't look like an argument. It looked like missed steps and unanswered emails. On Friday at 9:06 a.m., my ex-husband failed to appear for the documentation-only review listed on the clerk's calendar. The court sent an automated reminder at 9:12 and a failure notice at 9:31. I received neither. His lawyer did. At 10:04 a.m., the payment portal issued a second notice confirming continued compliance was required. The language was fixed. The tone was neutral. There was no place to explain motives. I saved the notice. At 11:20 a.m., my ex-husband's employer emailed HR forms again, this time requesting verification of parental leave eligibility. The email cited the court order. He replied asking for time. HR replied with a deadline. I was copied accidentally and then removed. I saved the first copy. At noon, my phone stayed quiet. I went to the market and bought milk and eggs. The receipt printed at 12:18 p.m. I folded it and put it in my wallet. At home, I fed my daughter and washed bottles. The sink dripped. I tightened the handle. At 1:43 p.m., my ex-husband's lawyer emailed asking if I would agree to a reduced payment schedule for the first month due to administrative confusion. He attached no documents. I replied with the portal link and the clerk's instructions. I did not add commentary. At 2:27 p.m., the lawyer replied asking for confirmation. I sent a screenshot of the portal's policy page. The exchange ended. On Monday morning, an email arrived from the court confirming the documentation review was closed due to compliance. The message thanked parties for cooperation. I archived it. By midweek, the wedding date passed. There was no announcement. A mutual acquaintance texted asking if it had been postponed. I said I didn't know. I muted the thread. At 9:58 a.m. on Thursday, my ex-husband emailed requesting visitation. He proposed Sundays. He asked if his mother could help. I replied with the court's standard form for visitation requests. I left the section for additional caregivers blank. He did not return the form. At 11:15 a.m., his mother emailed me directly asking to see the baby just once. She wrote that she was hurt. She wrote that family should heal. I did not reply. I forwarded the email to my private address and blocked her again. At 12:40 p.m., the payment portal sent a monthly statement. It listed amounts and dates. I downloaded the PDF and saved it. At 1:05 p.m., my ex-husband emailed asking if everything was in order now. I did not reply. The mistakes became smaller and more frequent. He sent an email meant for his lawyer to me instead, asking how to frame a response to HR. I forwarded it to his lawyer without comment. He missed a deadline to submit insurance paperwork. The provider sent a denial. He asked for an extension. The provider replied with policy text. He forgot to update his address on file. Mail was returned. He asked if I had received anything. I said no. At 3:30 p.m., a calendar invite appeared for a family meeting scheduled by his mother. I declined. The invite reappeared with a new title. I declined again. The third invite added his fiancée. I declined and blocked the sender. On Saturday, I took my daughter to the park. The swing creaked. I counted 10 pushes and stopped. A neighbor asked her name. I answered. We went home. On Monday, the court sent a routine compliance survey asking if orders were being followed. I checked yes and submitted. No one contacted me afterward. At 4:22 p.m. on Wednesday, my ex-husband's lawyer emailed stating he would be stepping back from representation due to differences in approach. He attached a notice of withdrawal filed with the court. I saved it. The following Friday, my ex-husband emailed asking if I would meet to talk without lawyers. I replied with one sentence, "Please submit requests in writing." He did not respond. Nothing dramatic happened. There were no confrontations. There were only systems that required inputs and produced outputs. When inputs were late or wrong, outputs followed policy. I stayed inside those lines. Each day ended with the same actions. Feed. Washington log. Sleep. The collapse continued without noise, driven by missed steps and documented responses. I didn't push it. I didn't fix it. I let it proceed. Life did not change all at once. It shifted in small, ordinary ways that did not ask for permission. 3 months after the court closed the review, I moved to a different apartment across town. The lease started on a Monday. The keys were handed to me at 10:12 a.m. The walls were plain. The locks turned smoothly. I checked them twice before setting my bag down. The first night there, I slept on a mattress on the floor. My daughter slept in a crib borrowed from my cousin. I woke at 2:40 a.m. to feed her and noticed the streetlight outside flickered. I made a note to buy curtains and then didn't. I went back to work part-time when she was 5 months old. My mother watched her 3 days a week. On the first morning, I left the house at 8:05 a.m. with a packed lunch and returned at 2:30 p.m. The routine held. That mattered. The physical change happened without planning. One afternoon, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and cut my hair to my jawline. It took less than 10 minutes. The next morning, it dried before I finished making coffee. No one commented except my manager, who said it was practical. I agreed. The payments continued. Each month, an automated email arrived from the portal. I downloaded the statement and saved it. I stopped checking the timestamps after the 3rd month. The amount stayed the same. There was one attempted interruption. On a Thursday afternoon, my phone rang from a number I recognized but hadn't seen in months. I let it ring. A voicemail followed. He said he wanted to see his daughter. He said he was ready now. He said he didn't know how things had gotten so complicated. I did not save the message. I deleted it. Instead, I opened the visitation form the court had provided and printed it. I filled in my sections and left his blank. I scanned it and filed it. If he wanted contact, the process was clear. He never returned the form. The wedding never happened. I learned this indirectly when a relative mentioned it in passing at a family gathering I attended only briefly. No details were shared. No explanations were offered. The topic changed. My daughter started crawling before she turned 1. I rearranged the furniture and put covers on the outlets. I bought a second-hand rug and washed it twice. The apartment smelled like detergent for days. One morning, while sorting mail, I found an envelope addressed to me with his handwriting. There was no return address. Inside was a short note. He wrote that he was sorry. He wrote that he should have trusted me. He wrote that he hoped we could be civil. I folded the paper once and put it back in the envelope. I placed it in the folder at the top of the closet. I did not respond. There was a moment months later when I ran into his mother at a supermarket. It was late afternoon. The produce section was crowded. She looked at the cart, then at my daughter, then at me. She opened her mouth as if to speak. I nodded once and moved past her. I did not slow down. She did not follow. The moment of indifference surprised me. It wasn't relief or satisfaction. It was simply the absence of reaction. I realized I had nothing to add and nothing to defend. On my daughter's 2nd birthday, I baked a small cake. My mother came over. We took photos on a phone and sent none of them anywhere. Afterward, I washed the dishes and took out the trash. The day ended when it ended. The folder stayed in the closet. I hadn't opened it in over a year. When I moved apartments again, I carried it myself and placed it on the same shelf. It remained unopened. Sometimes people ask how I managed. I tell them I followed instructions. I kept records. I showed up where required. I stayed quiet everywhere else. On a Tuesday evening, after putting my daughter to bed, I sat on the couch and filled out a form for preschool enrollment. I checked boxes and signed my name at the bottom. I wrote my phone number clearly. Outside, traffic moved as usual. Inside, the apartment was still. Nothing was unresolved enough to disturb the night. Life continued. That was enough.